Our series meets on Wednesdays at noon all throughout the academic year, and we are so excited that you're here. We're to begin today with a land acknowledgement.
Okay. All right, Don, give me a thumbs up when you see what I want you to see here. All right, cool. Here we go.
As the first land-grant institution established under the 1862 Morrill Act, we acknowledge that the state of Kansas is, historically, home to many native nations, including the Kaw, Osage, and Pawnee, among others. Furthermore, Kansas is the current home to 4 federally recognized native nations: the Prairie Band Potawatomi, the Kickapoo Tribe of Kansas, the Iowa Tribe of Kansas and Nebraska, and the Sac and Fox Nation of Missouri in Kansas and Nebraska.
Many native nations utilize the western plains of Kansas as their hunting grounds, and others, such as the Delaware, were moved through this region during Indian removal efforts to make way for white settlers. It's important to acknowledge this, since the land that serves as the foundation of this institution was, and still is, stolen land.
We remember these truths because K-State's status as a land-grant institution is a story that exists within ongoing settler colonialism and rests on the dispossession of indigenous peoples and nations from their lands. These truths are often invisible to many. The recognition that K-State's history begins and continues through indigenous contexts is essential.
Please remember
These truths,
because we still remember.
Thank you. Part of our professional development series, you come to enough of these, you can actually learn a professional development certificate. We have professional development certificates available for graduate teaching assistants as well as for faculty and staff. My colleague is going to drop the information to that in the chat right now. If you are a faculty member who is looking to extend not only your own teaching excellence, but the excellence of others, you can potentially be selected as a TLC Fellow. We have information about how to apply for that fellowship as well. So we are very excited that you're here. Next week, we're gonna have a teaching chat. Teaching chat is a day where we have these about once a month where you can kind of bring any questions or concerns or issues that you want to crowdsource some answers to, maybe some things that you want to discuss or just vent about. We have that opportunity. I'll also bring some questions that I want to talk about to that one. I had a couple questions from the last one that we didn't kind of get to. I'm also getting close to mid-semester, so I'll be interested in your thoughts about mid-semester evaluation, the pros, the cons, and how to do it. So that'll be something else we'll talk about in our teaching chat next week. But I am very, very excited to announce today's guest. Today's guest is Tareque Nasser from the College of Business. Tareque is one of the nicest human beings on the planet. I know that my world has definitely gotten brighter with Tareque in it. He does things like he brought me a milk soda the other day, which I don't even like milk, and that thing was amazing. So I really appreciate the kindness that Tareque is bringing. And it was very, very exciting for me that he agreed to be part of our professional development series this semester. And he's going to talk about a piece of peace, exploring authenticity and how it holds peace together. Tareque, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Ashley, should I share my screen? Okay. Well, if I get my mouse on the right place. Right. Can you all see it? Okay, excellent. All right, so thank you, Don, for inviting me to say something at your wonderful platform. Let me give you a little background about me so that you would understand that where I'm coming from. I did my undergrad in Thailand, a Catholic university called Assumption University. And after I graduated, they offered me a job. And then, they sent me to Australia for my master's in economics. I went back to Thailand. I had a contract, so I was teaching there as a junior instructor. Now, the students that I had are almost my age, 2 years younger than I was. So, they were basically my friends. But of course, Thailand is a country where there is hierarchical structure. So if you are an instructor or a professor, they would call you Achan, which is very similar like parents or royalties in Thailand. So there were this gap, but I tried to, well, actually get that gap disappear between us, because, well, I thought that, well, they should be my friends, and I should try to, well, teach them, as if I'm, well, sitting with my friend and, well, teaching. Well, I was able to, well, have certain breakthrough. So, well, I had, a certain number of students who were really close, became really close, because, well, the way that I was, well, acting with them, I was trying to be my true self. So, well, I was trying to be authentic. At that time, I had no idea what is authenticity. Well, the way that, well, Don is, well, basically profess, well, in terms of having a teaching philosophy, having a persona, well, I had none of that. So I was just, well, going with my guts. And that actually made me love teaching. So what happened is that, well, I had a, well, mentor back in Thailand. So he said that, well, Tareque, if you really like teaching, you should, well, get your PhD and, well, be a regular university professor. And so I decided, well, maybe I should do that. So, well, I, well, applied for my PhD, well, at different places in the United States. Well, Alabama accepted me. I, well, started my PhD over there. And from the very first year, since I had teaching experience, I was asked to teach every summer, and, well, sometimes during regular semester. So I taught, well, in Alabama for 6 years, well, including I was visiting faculty for a year over there before I got my job at K-State. So I have accumulated, well, quite a bit of teaching experience. I also, well, taught a little bit in Australia, where I did my master's. So, well, and I had a different, well, perspective about teaching at, well, different places that I was in. So, because I had a different role, so to speak, when I was teaching. But at the end, well, what I thought that, well, if I am being authentic, if I'm being my true self, well, I can do this, well, thing much better than if I am aloof. And, well, just being mechanical in terms of how I teach. So, well, when I heard, Don, well, talking about peace, well, I was enamored in a sense that, well, okay, well, this sounds really good. Well, I can actually try to build my teaching philosophy based on that thing. And my persona actually reflects, well, what, well, Don professes. So, well, Don asked me that, well, how about talking about something during this forum? I picked authenticity as the topic that I would like to explore. So here it is. Well, so let me, well, basically explain what I think is authenticity. And, well, now please understand that, well, I want it to be a facilitated discussion, so to speak. So I'm not necessarily a speaker. If you think that, well, you have something to add, or if you think that, well, I am not understanding this idea very well, chime in anytime. So what I think authenticity is basically a package of these four highlighted words that you see on the screen. Vulnerable, excuse my tongue twister, vulnerability, empathy, transparency, and resilience. And through this, well, I think that, well, I can create a deeper connection with my audience, whether it is students or anybody listening to me while I am talking about something. And if I can't establish that, well, I should be, performing better than if I'm not using that idea. So I think that, well, the idea of vulnerability goes hand in hand with authenticity. Because, well, it basically presents present myself to others with my flaws, fear, and whatever shortcomings that I may have, and then they would look into me as a person, and I would, well, look into them as well, people. So, well, we will be able to, well, have a connection that would help me to transfer whatever knowledge or experience that I have with much ease. So without vulnerability, I think that I would feel really shallow or incomplete when I'm talking to my audience. So this creates a sense of realness that builds trust and connection with others. So that's what I think authenticity is, and vulnerability is a big part of it. So then the question is that, what are the aspects of authenticity and vulnerability? Now, what I have done is that, I have posted some terms that would actually resonate with you in many cases. So feel free to chime in. What do we understand by honesty and transparency? What do we understand by embracing imperfection? Or if you see something over here that is not, you think is part of authenticity or vulnerability, feel free to chime in. Or if you think that there is something that I'm missing, do so, please. So just to let you know that, I've got 2 slides for the, 1 slide for this. I've got 2 slides for other stuff. So I'm eager to hear from you what you think, instead of me talking about this thing. Don, if you would like to start.
Sure. I think you've really kind of identified the hard aspects of authenticity. Yesterday in my principles of college teaching class, we were talking about these kind of things, and a couple of the students in there were kind of wondering about, how much can I share? How much should I share? Am I obligated to share? So I think this kind of struggling with vulnerability is a huge issue that people kind of have, especially earlier in their teaching, before they've kind of done it. One of the things that's kind of unfortunate with, something like authenticity and vulnerability is, once you've shared it, you can't unshare it, right? It's kind of like, a court of law, and they say, disregard what, that doesn't happen, right? So if you put something out there that makes you vulnerable, you've got to kind of live with that. So I think you've really identified really a core aspect to what makes this difficult.
So yeah, being honest to myself is really important. And if I am honest to myself, and I'm conveying that message to my students or my audience, I think that I can feel at ease. I would not feel basically, of course, opposite of honesty is dishonesty, is that I would not feel like somebody who doesn't deliver what he or she believes in. So and I'm comfortable with my imperfection. So in a sense that that's who I am. So I have my imperfection, and if the students understand those, then they can basically create a rapport with me. That's what I believe. And being honest and embracing my imperfection actually helps me to build the trust with them. So but of course, when I was teaching for the very first time, I had an easy way, because I was thinking that, these are my friends, so I had the courage to be real, in a sense. But a lot of cases when new let's say a person finished his or her PhD, and a rookie assistant professor, they would be really cautious to open themselves to the students. And they don't want to be vulnerable, so that the students would take advantage of them. So it's kind of way that we will try to basically be aloof to a certain extent. We'll try to show that we are the expert, and I am just a machine to impart knowledge, so to speak. That's I have seen that quite a bit. But at the end, we want to create a connection with our audience and the students. So that's what we want. So now, being authentic, what does that mean? Well, as I've mentioned that, we would like to embrace our imperfection. So in a sense that, you want want to admit that when you do not know something, well, it's not possible for me to know everything that related to the discipline that I'm teaching in. And I should be comfortable saying that, okay, well, this is something that I do not know, but I would like to find that out. Well, and I've heard that thing done said many times. So that helps being authentic. And of course, well, sharing personal stories. Well, I often tell my students that, how my wife is keeping me straight in a lot of different things, to the detriment of my reputation. But I do that because then they would feel that, okay, I can talk with this person being judged, so that I create a space for being vulnerable, me as well as my students, so that we get that connection. Also, having some flexible teaching-based method, where we seek feedback from the student, so that we can adjust the way that we teach, that helps the student perform better, without being rigid in terms of the way we deliver that thing. And so, also, it is important that we model this emotional honesty. In a sense that I be a role model of being authentic for my students, so that they can communicate better. And that would help us to engage in real-time problem solving. So that's what I understand. Don, please.
So I love these recommendations, but not everyone knows how to do these. So I wanted to kind of get your thoughts a little bit. So for admitting when you don't know something, this is something that, teachers tell me all the time, they don't want to do that. They're afraid that's going to give up their expertise, their authority, that preparation, right? That preparation, expertise are the two first parts of peace. They're afraid they're going to kind of sacrifice their authority as the knowledge giver in that class in some ways if they admit they don't know something. And with the sharing of personal stories, a lot of times students they don't know if it's relevant. They don't know if it's okay if it's not directly related to course content. So I was wondering, because I see a lot of resistance to those first two kind of recommendations from the people that I work with. I was wondering if you could share some thoughts that I could share with the people I work with.
Sure. So my research background is in corporate finance, but I often teach courses that are related with investment. Now, obviously, I would have gaps in my knowledge in certain areas in investment. Well, for example, I might not know how the negotiation happens in a merger and acquisition. And so, if a student asks me about that thing, I admit that, okay, my expertise in corporate finance, although part of it would be related to buying or selling firms, but that practical knowledge I don't possess. But so I tell them that, okay, I'll try to find it out. And what do I do? I read different books, where these negotiations had happened in the past. And I go back to my class and say that, okay, this is what I've learned, and I have asked around. So, and they appreciate that thing. Now, sharing personal stories, often thing that I tell my student is when I was a student myself, that how I face different problems, and how I try to solve those. Of course, I did not have the same kind of tools that they have right now. So I tell them that, for example, it would be a very common story that everybody would say is that, okay, if I am faced with a particular term that I really do not understand, I used to go to the library and get different books in the 90s and try to figure out that what it means. Nowadays, the students have internet where they can search. Even better, they can use generative AI to get some sort of an idea. So, I don't know. This particular story is going to tell the student that how to overcome different types of obstacle, but it's just an example. I don't know whether I'm making sense or not, Don.
No, it does. I think it's hard. As someone just dropped in the chat, right? Vulnerability seems to have a limit in the classroom. Do you think there's a limit to sharing imperfections as the professor that would then hurt the connection in the evaluations? And unfortunately, the evaluations are, something that we are concerned about in teaching. For example, the number of imperfections shared or how deeper that vulnerability is. So where's the line, right? Where do we get to that TMI, that too much information line with the sharing of personal stories? Because I know as a student, there were some professors that I definitely felt overshared. I wasn't ready to hear what they were telling me. And then there were others where I really appreciated them letting me inside. And a lot of it had to do with the context, the rapport we had already built, the of that event, the relevance to what we were talking about. So I just wonder if there were some ideas on where those limits are.
Well, the way that I deal with this thing is that, well, I kind of weigh in my mind that, well, what would be the benefit and the cost. And so, well, if I think that the benefit is much more than the cost, I wouldn't hesitate to share, well, those sort of stories. And as long as I think that, well, I'm being honest, I'm fine with that. For example, well, I'll share some story with you. Well, I don't know, well, how it would sound, but, well, I'm being authentic. So when I was in college, well, I used to smoke, right? Well, smoke cigarettes, nothing else. So that was in 90s. Well, after I got married, well, my wife was not really happy, me smoking. And so I was trying to cut, but it was really difficult. Then when I came to United States, a change of scenery actually helped me to, well, not smoke at all. But, well, COVID happened. After 20 years, I picked up smoking. And what happened last year is that, well, also, well, this is another thing that I share with my students, that I'm a Muslim. And, well, I fast during, well, Ramadan, and also in the evening after breaking my fast, well, I lit up a cigarette in my deck, well, on my deck. I never smoke in the house. And that was a really windy day. And, well, I put off the cigarette, but for some reason, an ember flew, and, well, our house caught on fire. And so I'm out of my house for 1.5 years. And this week, I'm moving back to my house. So, well, it tells them that, well, I'm a human. Well, I have my flaws. I have my, well, own way of looking at the world, well, which might not, well, be the same that they look at. But, well, I'm there for them, for their, helping them out, in a sense that, well, I'm always available so that I can help them, regardless of my belief, regardless of my personal preference, practice. And so I'm open to that. So, well, as long as I can share those kind of stories, well, that may, well, some students might look down on me. Well, I would take that risk for the greater benefit. So that's how I weigh things, and how I would be authentic about it. So, well, my idea is that I would not lie no matter what. So that's how I look at this thing. And so, and, well, yes, sometimes I share some personal stories, sometimes I don't. Again, well, it depends on that, well, how I balance the benefit and the cost. I hope that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense, and I really appreciate the vulnerability you just modeled and sharing that story. I'm so sorry to hear about your house.
Thank you. So, well, again, being authentic, well, I have some other, well, points over here. Well, I would not, well, try to explain each of those. Well, feel free to chime in if you think that, well, this is something that you do or don't, or something else that you do. And I can do things that I do with my students. I cold call. So I'm willing to cold call if that's okay with you. Or feel free to chime in. Ashley, what do you think?
About what's on this slide here, is that
Yes.
correct? Is that the
Yeah.
question? Okay. It's hard because I struggle with like celebrating imperfection. And I guess I don't know exactly what we mean about imperfection in this like in the context of teaching.
Mhm.
I know we've talked about like not knowing the answer. And for example, I'm pretty upfront with my students about this. This is something I think I do well, and this has actually become a common like segment of my class because I teach a forensic psychology course. And on the first day of class, I tell them, I'm like, I'm not a forensic psychologist and I'm not even training to be one. And what that means is that you're going to ask plenty of good and valid questions that I don't know the answer to. They asked me a lot about like criminal cases that like no one's ever heard of. So I'm like, I will write down the information that you're giving me. I will go find it. And I'll report back, but I don't necessarily think of that as an imperfection necessarily. Um, and I think I'm pretty transparent about that. And I thank them because that their questions help me learn too. So I think this is a pretty good list, and I try to do that, but I'm not totally sure what we mean by imperfection right now.
So, well, in this case, the way that I look at the imperfection is that, well, I'm not know-it-all, so I can't really know everything, and so my students. Well, so in a sense, well, sometimes you need to go out on a limb to, well, understand something, and well, and you are willing to make mistakes. So, well, in a sense that you don't want to make mistakes, but well, there is nothing wrong if you say something wrong. And especially, it's, well, I try to tell my students that, okay, well, I'm not going to judge you in any way. If you will tell me something, that's a gain in a sense that, well, I would know that, well, what you don't understand, so I can, well, explain better, or in a sense that other students are going to understand that, oh, well, my friend over here is also, well, in the dark, and well, they might share those things. So in a sense that, well, creating that kind of culture of openness, embracing the imperfection, and well, do not, well, be afraid about it. So that's what I was thinking. I don't know whether it makes sense to you or not. All right, so well, how do we measure authenticity? Because, well, okay, well, we want to be authentic, but well, how do I know that I'm being authentic? Now, obvious way would be, well, you ask yourself that, well, what I'm saying, is it congruent with my belief or not, in a sense. So when you do this self-reflection and self-assessment, you would have a sense that how authentic you are. You can also ask your peers and students, well, in terms of, well, trying to get an idea that, well, what do they think about, well, when you are teaching, and well, get a bearing on is that, well, whether they perceive you as being authentic or not. And of course, well, there is risk to this thing. Well, so you want to ask people that you are close to, in a sense, that, well, you have faith in them, that, well, they would be honest about it. So, well, that's, well, a caveat to that thing. And then, well, you also look into your behavioral indicators, in a sense that, well, again, well, it would be related to that, well, how true you are being with yourself. Well, also like whether there is a emotional congruence, well, over a period of time, in a sense that you are doing the same thing, but if you're, well, doing one thing in one time and, well, not doing that thing in another time, that means, well, most likely you are not being authentic. You are just, well, putting different hats at different time. So, well, these would be some sort of, well, kind of measure of authenticity. Cognitive dissonance, in a sense that, well, if you say something and then, well, later on you think that, oh, well, I shouldn't have done that. Well, in a sense that, well, then again, well, the consistency is not there, and, well, you are feeling bad. So well, different people would have different types of, well, openness. And there is nothing wrong being a little closed in terms of what you can share and not. Well, Don, you have a question?
Yes, I do. So I was kind of wondering, you mentioned like it might be potentially perceived as inauthentic if you're wearing different hats. I think a lot of us do. And the way that I kind of craft my teaching persona for, let's say, a first year experience class, right? With first year, first time college students, many of them first generation, those sorts of things. might be different than the way that I craft my teaching persona for an upper level graduate seminar. So I've never thought of myself as being kind of inauthentic. I'm kind of thinking of myself of, making salient what those students need. So I was wondering what your thoughts are kind of about that, because that comment scared me and made me think I wasn't being as authentic as I thought I was.
No. Well, I totally understand where you're coming from. I didn't mean to say that, well, I don't teach different groups of students differently. What I'm saying is that, well, so I am, in a sense that, well, I'm trying to portray myself in a certain way in a particular situation than another situation. So, well, of course, well, again, well, you have to think about that, well, how the audience would be receptive to your openness. If it is, well, let's say a 1 week class, I might not be that open with them, because, well, they would misunderstand me compared to if I'm teaching over a whole semester, because, well, with more interaction, they would really know that who I am. So I totally understand, well, what you're saying, but that's not something that I meant.
That makes me feel a whole lot better. Thank you for clarifying that.
Sure.
There's a question in the chat. Do you try to connect your vulnerabilities, your stories, and your sharing to the course content?
Yes, I do. So in a sense that, well, the way that, well, I teach is that, well, in a sense that I tell stories, stories about, well, the knowledge that we want to understand. And often, well, I try to crack a joke related to that story about my, well, shortcomings. So this would be a really weird example, but I would tell it to you anyway. So one of my colleague was from South Korea back in Thailand. And he told me a story, something like this, is that, well, father and son were sitting in front of a fireplace, and a golden dragon came out of the fireplace. And the father stood up, slapped the son really hard, and gave him a golden coin. So the son was really, well, perplexed at what's going on. So his father said that, well, I want you to remember this event, so that, well, I did these two things that you would never forget. Well, of course, well, golden dragon coming out of the fireplace is also really shocking. So I don't know why the father need to do that thing, but the idea is this. So, well, I try to link stories of my own with stories of the discipline that I'm teaching on, in a sense that would make a connection and it would be more memorable. So, well, I don't know whether, well, it answered the question on the chat or not, but, well, that's how I look into this thing. So, well, I often tell snippets of my, well, life to my class that would be related one way or another, well, to the topic that I'm teaching, and it helps them to understand the material better. Well, I think that, well, this can be up for debate in a sense that whether it is a good idea or not. All right. So hindrance to being authentic. Of course, well, we are afraid of any kind of judgment or rejection. If I see a student, well, making a face when I'm saying something, I would be a little afraid that, well, what kind of judgment they're passing on this thing. So, but, well, over time, well, I don't worry about it too much. And, well, since I teach, well, for a whole semester, I think that I would have further opportunity to interact with them, so that, well, any kind of preconceived idea that they may have for whatever information that I have shared, well, that would go away. So, well, that's something that I try to do. So, and, well, of course, well, there are other points that I have mentioned over here, and I'm quite sure that, well, you all will understand those things, and you will, well, so in a sense, well, my son, well, he is a well university student, and I look at him, and well, he will try to do things perfectly, and actually that's really detrimental, in a sense that, okay, well, he wants to write an email to his professor, and he would wait for days because he is afraid that he might use a wrong word. Now, well, that's, I mean, well, when I look at him and when I talk with him, he's very different than, well, what he is doing, well, in his, well, emails or any kind of written communication. So I don't know whether he's afraid of, well, judgment and rejection and being perfect. That can be a hindrance to authenticity to a certain extent. So I don't know whether it makes sense to you or not, but well, that's what I think. Imposter syndrome is something that I have suffered from, well, quite a lot. Well, after I finished my PhD, in a sense that, well, because I knew that, well, I don't know a whole lot, because and that bothered me, well, being an expert in an area. So that's why I wanted to talk about that, well, how authenticity can be linked with other aspect of peace, preparation, expertise, care, and engagement. So, well, these are something that can actually, well, impede you to be authentic. That's what I think. Well, similarly, well, you can see that, well, other points that I have posted over here, well, you can see that, well, how this can, prove to be hindrance for being authentic. Natalie, you want to chime in a little bit?
I was gonna say, I just, in general, I've now been sitting here thinking about authenticity a lot. And I love that term more than, by the way, vulnerability. I'm the one who asked the question about, is there a limit to vulnerability? Because I feel like vulnerability, we've been talking about it at more of a surface level, and that you mean more showing that you're human, to get that authenticity with vulnerability, versus I'm going to share everything about, about my life and my imperfections, not just in not knowing everything, but imperfections as all of them. And so that's where I was asking if there's a limit when what you mean by that vulnerability and sharing. I think when you use the word vulnerability, there's absolutely a huge fear of it. But if you mean showing that you're human, I think people are more accepting, which is what every example you've given is, just showing that you're more human every time. So I like that. And yeah, the whole not really thinking you're the expert, I completely agree with. It's hard to sometimes get over that. But I think also just showing that is authentic to others too. That while we know a lot about certain things, we don't know everything, is a huge opener.
So
I like this slide.
yeah, thank you. So that's a good segue to the next slide. So you can see that. So yeah, well, I don't need to tell everything that I have done wrong or in my life. I don't need to show what's in my closet or anything. But of course, what I want to create is that I want to create a rapport with my student, that they feel comfortable and they feel trusting, in a sense that, well, if they have any problem, they would not think twice to share that with me, and me helping them. So that's my objective. So, being vulnerable, in a sense that, when you are vulnerable, you are showing authenticity. So of course, you can show a whole lot or not that much. But as long as they understand that, you are being true to yourself while communicating with them, that would help them to engage better. So in terms of the engagement that I'm going to have with my student, well, if I'm authentic, that should help. That's what I think is important in this particular case, if it makes sense. So yes, modeling vulnerability is really important, and Don liked the way that I have shown my vulnerability to you. Hopefully that makes me close to you in terms of me being opening up, and so you would be able to communicate with ease. So that's what I think. Normalizing making mistake and learning. So in a sense that I tell my students all the time, and I'm quite sure that you do too, is that saying something wrong is not bad, but it's good in a sense that it helps me to understand that where I need to work on. So don't be afraid to say things. And if there is mistakes, there would not be penalties that would in terms of their penalty on their emotional state or grading or something like that. So yeah, forgive and forget for the first few times. But then of course, if they're repeating, that's a different thing. Sometimes, you need to ask an open-ended question in a sense that, they can answer in any way they want. I don't want to ask loaded question where I will expect a particular kind of answer. That can help them, my class, being more authentic with me. Of course, I want to be authentic first, and try to extend my hand of help, and hopefully they will grab that. So having this hierarchical relationship can also be hindrance to being authentic. So it's very important that you don't show that kind of thing. Oh, I'm the professor and you're the student. There is a big gap between us. This sort of thing can, of course, not help you to be authentic to a certain extent. So anything else that you want to pick on? Theodore, if you want to say something. Sorry to pick on you.
I didn't hear you called on. Was it me?
No, Theodore.
Okay. While Ted is thinking of a potential answer, I'm going to say that someone who just joined, what does PEACE mean? PEACE is an acronym that I use for kind of the foundation for excellence teaching. It's preparation, expertise, authenticity, caring, and engagement.
So that's, authenticity is the third item in PEACE. The first one is preparation. The second one is expertise. The third one is authenticity. Fourth one is caring. And fifth one is engagement. And so, according to Don Saussure, this helps you to build your own persona in terms of what you want to be, and creates and that would help you to create your teaching philosophy. Now, I believe that authenticity is really important because it is linked with other four items intricately. So when preparation becomes meaningful, if you are genuine, in terms of what you are trying to tell your student, and willing to be adaptable. Again, expertise is more relatable and respected when you are honest about your limits and continuously learning. So, these four other things are really important, but if you're not authentic, I don't think that you can actually deliver any one of these four effectively, or implement these four effectively. So that's the basic idea for this particular talk, because I wanted to look into a particular piece of PEACE and see that how they hold together the whole piece, PESE. In a sense. So that's what I have actually. So by being authentic, you create a more integrated approach to the peace framework, where each element supports the other, creating a more trusting, effective, and connected learning environment. So any thoughts? And I'm quite sure that Don is going to say a lot.
Well, I guess I'll fulfill that self-fulfilling prophecy right there and say that, obviously I'm a big fan. And I think, the piece construct that we've kind of been working with as a foundation for excellent teaching, the authenticity component is the one that people struggle with. The preparation, the expertise, people kind of get that one. The caring, that makes sense. Not everyone agrees to the extent to which they want to show caring for their students, but they kind of get that one. And then engagement is one that, again, is pretty non-controversial. The fact that you should be engaged in your teaching, that'll help your students engage, that'll help them learn, is something that, people kind of buy into. But this authenticity piece, this is really where that variability kind of lies in my personal experiences. And also our data is the one that our students are kind of like, I don't see that all the time with my professors. So I really like the focus here, and I really like some of the actionable, practical things that you've kind of recommended. But I think that it's almost, Ashley and I do some work with like Maslow's hierarchy of needs as it relates to teaching. When you get to kind of thinking about the level of authenticity you want to show, a lot of the other stuff has to be taken care of first, right? You've got to you kind of be comfortable with your content before you can kind of be comfortable in your own skin in the classroom. So I'm kind of wondering if you could talk a little bit about what are the things that have to get in line before you can focus on authenticity, because I think it really is, it's not the first thing I think that a lot of teachers are ready to do. So what's kind of the order of events to get to authenticity, if you're willing to share your thoughts on that?
Sure. Well, definitely, you need to prepare for your class, because, if you're not prepared, you're not going to be effective in any way or form. So, and of course, your preparation means that, you would want to be an expert in that area, what you are teaching. Now, of course, you would not know everything, and authenticity plays a role in that part, is that, being humble, being, able to acknowledge that, you do not know everything, and you are caring enough to, find out that, how you can deliver the material better. You think about the content, you think about, how you're going to answer to the student question. So, and frankly speaking, when we are talking about engagement, a big piece of engagement is that, trying to understand the student's need, and try to understand that what you want to achieve. And so, basically, I think authenticity is lubricant in a way for, caring and engagement. So, that's how I feel, in a sense that, the first two component, you must have it. I mean, there is no two way about it. You have to prepare, and you need to be an expert in that area, that what you want to teach. So that's, you cannot do without. Yes, you can teach a particular course without being authentic, but the question is that how effective you are. So, I want to think of, look into authenticity as a lubricant, which would help us to perform better in terms of, what we want to do. And so, in terms of, importance, it is ever encompassing, but it would not, it would be great to have, let me put it this way. If you want to really enjoy what you want, what you do, in a sense that if I'm teaching, and if I'm not being authentic to myself, it's a chore to me. It's not something that I would enjoy. So, if I really want to enjoy, I have to be authentic. Does that make sense?
It does, and I like that you're kind of focusing on the instructor's experience in the class too, because I think sometimes people get a little bit fatigued about the student focus. They're thinking, well, it's more work for me. Well, actually, I think excellent teaching is actually much more fulfilling and enjoyable for us as well as the instructor. There's an important comment in the chat that I'm going to read out loud so that the people who are watching, they say synchronously, who don't have the benefit of the chat can hear it. And Tareque, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
Sure.
So one of our colleagues says that they have concerns that some of us, because of our gender, sexuality, gender expression, disability, or race, are already seen as less competent by students. In fact, research indicates that students underestimate their female instructors by about 1 degree earned. If we are vulnerable, perhaps most of all in fields where people like this are unfamiliar to students, students may mistake it for being too emotional, unprofessional, etc. Things some of us are already more likely to be accused of. To me, this is one reason why, as an institution, it's important for us to ensure there are a variety of people are instructing our students so they can get used to seeing all kinds of people as competent in the fields that they are studying.
So my take on that thing is that, well, I'm open to anything, in a sense that, well, I have my identity that can be labeled as something that people would frown on. And why would I do that to other people? So in a sense, I think that it is my duty to to uphold diversity, uphold any kind of idea that is that would be labeled as shameful or taboo or something like that. Now, if you are, I don't want to say that whether if you're brave enough, but well, if you are comfortable enough to express who you are, be authentic. Of course, depending on where you are, that can create problem. Of course, we need institutions who which is sympathetic to all these causes. Now, of course, how much you share and what you think that would be the consequence of it. It's cost and benefit. So in the short run, you have to think about that. Okay, how much benefit am I going to get if I am sharing something that is personal to me versus what would be the cost to me? So yes, your degree of openness can vary, but that doesn't mean that you're not authentic. Did I answer your question?
I'm not sure there was exactly a question in there, but I think I
It was a
appreciate your
statement.
thoughts on the
Right.
comment, and it's an important comment. Kind of extending the comment, another colleague said they have a student who's told them that the student has to hide their authentic self because people like her have been historically discriminated against in the society. Another of our colleagues says our differences make us unique. One of one, no one else has our story. So I think there's definitely some risk, right, in being vulnerable. And I think you've kind of nicely talked about, how we need to assess that risk and different ways that if we decide to be authentic, that we can do so in our class with the purpose of support and extending our student learning. But I think we have to do so in ways that are safe for us. And I
Right.
think what our colleagues are doing in the comments are noting that there might be dangers for some individuals that others are maybe not aware of.
So there other ways to be authentic, in a sense that I go to my class early enough, talk about football. We try to figure out that what are the commonalities that can help us to create a relationship. And I talk about that. I heard Don talking about Eminem and in his video singing songs. So if he can find something that I value or I like, and if my students will have a similar kind of thing, we can be authentic in that dimension and still work towards for greater teaching and learning. We don't have to show all of our cards. As long as we have some common cards, we can swap those. So thank you very much.
Yeah, so I was just going to say we're about out of time, and I wanted to give everyone in the audience the opportunity to thank Dr. Nasser for being here and sharing with us amazing thoughts on authenticity, and Tareque, definitely for modeling authenticity throughout your conversation with us today. I'd like to let everyone know that we have a post-event survey available for us for you to complete in the comments, in the chat, if you'd be willing to click that link. And that's one of the steps to getting the professional development certificate that the TLC offers. And if you're attending this event, maybe you're interested in earning one of those. And that information is also available in a link that one of my colleagues will share here in a second in the chat as well. Next week, we'll be having a teaching chat. Again, teaching chats is an opportunity to come and bring issues and concerns and things that you'd like to kind of crowdsource, answers to. It's also I get to kind of ask some questions of the group. And next week, some of the things on my mind are mid-semester evaluation. What does it mean? Should we do it? If we're going to do it, how are we going to do it? What are our obligations? Those sorts of things. Spoiler alert, I think it's an important thing, and I think there's good ways to do it. So we'll talk about that a little bit next week. But again, I want to thank you for taking some time out of your Wednesday to be here. We'll be here next week at noon. And if you can't be here in person or in real time, I guess none of us here in person, but if you can't be here in real time, we record all of these events for asynchronous viewing. Those are available on our TLC webpage, and this video will be up a little bit later today. So thanks again so much for your time today. Thanks so much, Dr. Nasser, for being here, and I hope you all have a great Wednesday.